In addition to multimedia, you can add great interactive effects using JavaScript. And Dreamweaver includes a wonderful collection of tools for helping you add JavaScript to your pages without having to write the JavaScript yourself. You'll find most of these options under the Windows menu when you choose Behaviors. Dreamweaver calls these features behaviors, and you'll find a list of them when you click on this little tiny arrow just down and to the right of the plus sign. Here you'll see now a drop-down list of options you can select. Each of these is a JavaScript behavior, meaning when you use this option, Dreamweaver will create JavaScript to make it work. One of the most popular and commonly used JavaScripts on the web is the swap image JavaScript, or in this case, Dreamweaver calls it the swap image behavior. Using this behavior, you can cause one image to be replaced by a second image when a visitor to your site rolls their cursor over the first image. You may have heard these called rollover images, and they have been very commonly used in the past for things like navigation bars, where you want a little bit of a change when someone rolls their cursor over an image. But you can also create more complex swap image effects and actually change any image on the page. We'll do that in the final lesson of this chapter, but first let's create a simple rollover image. If you're following along, I want you to go ahead and create a new page in this site. So choose File, New. Remember, we're using the Nature Photographer site that's in the Chapter 11 folder of your project files. If you have multiple sites listed here, make sure you selected that version. You want to create a page from template. We'll choose the gallery template again and choose Create. Now before I do anything else, let's go ahead and save the page. This time I'll call this Rollover. And I'll save it into my Galleries folder again, click Save. Now, once again, I'm just going to delete that photo placeholder so that I can insert my rollover into this editable region called Photo. If you prefer, you can start with a blank page. It really doesn't matter what's already on the page when you add this. But I want to point out that if you're just doing a simple rollover, in addition to using the swap image behavior from the Behaviors panel, Dreamweaver actually has a built-in special dialog just for creating simple rollover images. So like most things, the first thing you want to do is get your cursor where you want that image to appear. And now from the Insert menu, I want you to choose Image Objects, Rollover Image. Not surprisingly, you can also find this from the Insert panel. Again, if you're at the Common Insert panel and you click on the arrow next to the image, you'll also find the Rollover Image option here. In the Insert Rollover Image dialog, you have a few things you need to do. The first one is to give your rollover a name. In this case, you're identifying the rollover, but it's very important that you use no spaces and no special characters in the name. So you could call it something like rollover, or you might choose to be more specific. In this example, I'm going to create a rollover using two of the photographs that I've taken of the Thule elk. So I'm going to call this elk, but again, no spaces, no special characters. Now you have an original image and a rollover image field. These two fields are where you will select and enter the address or the path to the two images. So original image will be the image that appears on the page when it's first loaded into a browser. Rollover image will be the second image, the one that replaces the first one when someone rolls their cursor over it. So let's browse. And I want you to note that you should go into the Galleries folder in your Nature Photography site. Remember, this is in the Chapter 11 project files. And here you'll find two images that I've created specifically for this effect, heads down and heads up. The first image that I want to appear is called heads down. So go ahead and select that and click on Choose. By the way, sometimes when I'm creating effects like this, I'll name the images 1 and 2 or A and B, just to make it easier when I get to this dialog to remember which one goes first. That's especially helpful if you're creating a series of rollover images like this. Now let's browse and choose the second one, heads up. And now you need some alternate text. Again, just as if you're entering a single image on the page, the alternate text should describe what these images are. I'm just going to say Thule elk, but you might want to be more specific when you use a rollover image. And finally, you have the option of making this rollover image also a link. So for example, I could send people to the gallery page, Gallery 2, which is my elk page, when they click on it. So now the way this is set up, when someone clicks on this rollover image, they'll go to the Gallery 2 page. When they roll a cursor over it, the second image will replace the first. Once you've got all of those fields filled in, click OK. And Dreamweaver automatically inserts the first image of the two images. And you can go ahead and add a caption if you want. So I'll just put in Thule elk, heads up, heads down. You'll see in a moment if you haven't figured out yet what the effect's going to be. You won't be able to actually see that effect until you preview this in a browser. So you want to go to the preview icon, choose a browser to preview the page. Of course, you need to save it before you can preview it. And now watch when I roll this cursor over the image, you see the one image replaced with the second. So in this case, heads up, heads down. It's a cute little effect. It's a very handy effect when you just want to add a little surprise behind an image. But here's one last tip. It's very common to use a rollover effect for navigation bars like this one, and you really don't need to use images for that anymore. These days, you can use cascading style sheets and simply change the style of the active and hover link states to create a rollover effect for your links. And that's a much faster and much more accessible way to create links than using images. So I would reserve your use of rollovers for little tricks like this, rather than for creating a navigation bar like this one. Let's switch back to Dreamweaver. Again, I'm just using Alt-Tab or Command-Tab to come back to Dreamweaver. And I want to select this image and point out a couple of differences now. You can really only change the first image using the Properties Inspector. Notice here the height and width are automatically entered. And here's a tip. You should always make sure that the height and width of both images in your rollover image effect are exactly the same size. And that's because in the HTML code, 500 by 333 is written into the code. And when that second image appears in place of this one, it will be set to fill exactly the same amount of space. So if the second image is physically smaller or larger than the first image, then the browser will have to either stretch it or shrink it down a little bit to make it fit that space. And either way, you can get some distortion. So when you're preparing images for a rollover effect like this, make sure that you size them exactly the same height and width. Also notice over here in the Behaviors panel that now that I've set up this rollover image, Dreamweaver has automatically set up the Swap Image and the Swap Image Restore behaviors. You could actually make changes here now if you wanted. For example, you could change On Mouse Over to On Click, or to any of the other options on this list. The most common ones are On Click and On Mouse Over. On Mouse Out simply means when you roll your cursor back off the image. And here what the JavaScript is telling the browser is to put back that first image or restore that first image in place of the one that was swapped. In the final lesson of this chapter, we'll use this same swap image behavior to create a much more complex rollover effect. So let's go ahead and close this page and get ready to create a more complex behavior.